Hi friends, welcome back to Faith and Arrow Homestead. My name is Jaylee, and if you've been here for a minute now, you may have seen my easy baking mixes video. It took off. It's gotten, I think we're approaching like 200,000 views, which is just crazy. And I'm still figuring out how to do this YouTube thing. I'm still relatively new. I've not even had my channel 2 years yet. So all of my immediate friends and family who were experiencing this excitement with me said, okay, well, now you know what your viewers are interested in seeing. Give them more of what they like. And so I said, all right. So I sat down and I put together a Easy Baking Mixes Holiday Edition, just to give you a few more because people really seemed to like the concept, the idea of making baking mixes like you would buy at the store, like how you buy the little baggies of the various baking mixes, muffins and such, cookies, and having it on your pantry shelves so that when you want to bake it, you just add the wet ingredients and you go. It's a fun time saver, but it's also a really excellent gift opportunity. And those are the two perspectives that I want you to look at this today. I have 4 recipes for you today. One of them, the one we're going to start with, is actually what I'm giving everybody for Christmas this year. I've been very lucky. All of my friends and family have been very receiving and open to receiving homemade gifts from me because I have not been able to afford buying gifts these last couple of years. So this year I am going to be giving one of these mixes as gifts, and so I want you to look at it from that perspective, from a gift-giving perspective, but also the perspective of just having this on your pantry shelves as a convenience item. Or if you have adult children, you could give them these to help them on Thanksgiving morning, Christmas morning, that kind of thing. So anyway, the recipes that we have, I'm going to start with my favorite one, which are apple butter cookies. It's my favorite because it's my recipe. I created it. And that's what I'm giving as gifts. We also have banana bread, could also be zucchini bread. We have snickerdoodles and we have cinnamon rolls. And I'm so excited to get started. Now there is one thing that I want to talk to you about before we get started. I got hundreds of comments on that post, and some of them were kind of criticizing my methods in the first video. Mind you, that first video is over a year old now, so I've learned a lot. And I do things differently in the kitchen in some ways. However, I did listen to the advice, and that's what I want this community to be. Some of them were a little aggressive, but I like the idea of talking about concepts and giving tips and talking about, you know, baking is a science. And so in some ways, it does need to be consistent. And so I like those conversations. So I've listened to you, I've read the comments, and I'm going to do things a little differently in this video, and I'll point those tips out to you. The first thing that I received a lot of pushback, I guess, was the fact that when you make these baking mixes, the sugar is already in with the dry ingredients. Therefore, you cannot combine the butter and the sugar first. Now that's pretty standard with cookie recipes. Using a stand mixer or a hand mixer, you beat the butter and the sugar until it's light and fluffy, and then you go from there. That is pretty standard. However, all of those baking mixes from the first video have been used, and they all turned out fine. And with this apple butter recipe, with it being my recipe, I adapted it to be a baking mix, and I wanted to be sure that the way I altered the instructions still give you a consistently good product. So I already went ahead and made a batch, and they just came out of the oven. So let's take a look. They are still beautiful. Oh, nice and fluffy. I love these cookies. This is still really good. I want to remind you that I am just a home cook, a home baker. I have no education in this. I've never taken any classes. I'm just learning as I go. So we're not making croissants in here, okay? We are making cookies. And if you don't cream the butter and the sugar, I understand that the results may be slightly different than if you had, and perhaps even a little less desirable. However, you're still gonna end up with a perfectly delicious cookie. And that's not to say that there aren't certain instructions that really should be followed. For example, I'm going to recommend that you refrigerate this dough before you bake it, and that helps prevent spreading of the cookies. So that's an example of, if you don't follow the instruction, you really could end up with a cookie that is too thin and brittle. And I actually could have kept these in the refrigerator a little longer. They were only in there about 20 minutes. I recommend an hour. I think the recipe online might even say 2 hours. So, you know, there are certain things that are recommended, but we're just doing the best we can here. And I wanted to do the test run so that I could confidently stand here and say, not creaming the butter and the sugar first is fine. You're still gonna end up with an awesome cookie. One of the tips that I was seeing a lot of in the comments was to combine everything in a bowl first and then mix it really well and then put it in the container that you're gonna store it in to make sure that everything gets properly mixed. And that's fine. I felt like it went fine the way that I did it in the other one, but I can understand the desire to want this to be like really nice and mixed properly. So that's fine, we'll do it this way. I have half a cup of white sugar, half a cup of just lightly packed brown sugar. You don't have to really densely pack that one. Then we've got 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. You want half a teaspoon cream of tartar, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get all this mixed together. The brown sugar is a little bit chunky. And I wondered about this when I was doing my trial run before filming this today, if that was going to cause an issue with the cookies, and it did not. So don't worry too much about the brown sugar being a little clumpy in your dry mix. It will be okay. But still, with your whisk, try to break it up the best you can. Now for this one, when you are multiplying the recipe, because obviously, as you can see, I'm just doing 1 serving here. When you're multiplying it to decide how many batches you want to make in one go, you want to think about how many people you're gifting this to. So let's say, for example, there are 4 people that you want to give this to. So all of those measurements, which will be in the description, you will want to multiply by 4. And then the way that you figure out how much of the dry mix to take out per batch is you look at the amount of dry ingredients there are all together. So you add half a cup of white sugar, half a cup of brown sugar, 1 3/4 cup of flour, and then you had some teaspoons here and there. So you have just about 3 cups worth of dry mix. Now, what I have here is a pint-sized jar. I tested this before I filmed today. This does fit, but barely. And so I'm kind of glad, because that makes it really easy for you. If this bowl was full of mix and you were trying to portion it out into the different servings, it'd be really easy to tell how much, because you can just barely fit the 3 cups in here. So what I did was I put some in, and then I kind of tapped it on the counter to get it down in there. And as you can see, I have my funnel. That was another little tip somebody gave me. So see, we are pretty much right up to the top of this jar, and we still have all this mix to get in there. And I was really wondering what the heck I was gonna do earlier when I was doing this test run. I was like, dang it, I'm gonna have to go through and adjust all the measurements on this recipe. I really don't wanna do that. But I'm telling you, somehow, by the grace of God, we got this in here. Get it all in there, and then, do you see? It just barely fits. So, there is our dry mix, which is lovely. Love that. I'm gonna throw a lid and a ring on there. Beautiful. Oh, and look, I just happened to pick a mason jar that had a snowflake on it. How cute and appropriate. Now, for the sake of this video, I have a jar of home canned salted caramel pear butter, because these are apple butter cookies, but you don't have to use apple butter. You could use apple butter, pear butter, peach butter, whatever butter your family likes, whatever you have canned up on your shelves. This portion of the gift giving only works if you are buying it from a farmer's market, if you have a friend that you can get some from, if you can fruit butters on your own, you do not want to buy a thing of fruit butter from the store and then open it and pour it into little containers and then close it and give that, because that's not shelf stable. That's not gonna work. So you need something that is sealed and good in order to give them together. You can just give the dry mix, but how cute is it to give both the dry mix as well as the fruit butter? That's why I'm showing you this one, is like, this is what I'm doing for Christmas this year, because that is so cute. So I have salted caramel pear butter from last year, but I'm actually planning in the next few days to do a big batch of apple butter, and I'm actually going to can them in these little jars because you need half a cup. This is way more fruit butter than anybody's gonna need for the recipe. I'm just doing it for the sake of the video. But when I go through and can my apple butter, I'm gonna put them in these little jelly jars. That's gonna be so cute, and it's gonna be the perfect amount. I love that. The other ingredients that you're going to need, so I'm gonna go ahead and title this apple butter cookies. The other ingredients that you're gonna need are 1/4 cup butter, and I'm gonna say either very soft or even melted. I'm gonna say softened or melted. 1/2 cup of apple butter, or you know what? In giving this to people, I'm gonna say 1 jar apple butter. That way nobody's trying to measure what we give them. 1 egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then our instructions are to combine the butter, the apple butter, the egg, and the vanilla separately in a separate bowl. So combine wet ingredients, and then gradually add your dry until combined. For best results, you want to refrigerate your dough for at least an hour. Now this next instruction brings me to the next portion of this gift. So I bought some stuff at Walmart the other day, and they had these cute little, they're cake pop bags, but I think they're gonna work fine for what I need them for. And I can link some version of these down in the description for you. Oh, this is perfect. And then here I have 1/2 cup of white sugar and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. That's usually my go-to ratio for making cinnamon sugar. 1/2 cup white sugar and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. I'm gonna see if I can, I wonder if this will, oh, yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in this baggie. Nice. And then it came with cute little ribbon. So I'm gonna go around the bag once and tie it in a knot so that this is definitely secure, because I don't want any messes with these gifts. Around the neck of my jar, see if we can make that pretty. Cute. Oh, I'm really liking how this is coming together. After the dough has been refrigerating for at least an hour, you want to roll out 1.5 to 2 inch balls and roll in your cinnamon sugar. Your oven is preheated to 375 degrees, and you're baking for 12 to 14 minutes. So we're just going to put this down in the bag. Along with our instructions. And then I bought some of this. I was looking for ribbon. They didn't really have their ribbon out yet. It is still kind of early, so I just bought this cord, is what it's called. Decorative cord. So I would rather have ribbon. But there we go. Friends and family, I'm sorry, now you know what you're getting for Christmas. Now, one more thing that I want to say about this before we move on from these is that somebody had such a great suggestion in the comments of my other video, and they said you should create printable instructions and put them on your website. I have a website This apple butter recipe is on my website. It'll be linked in the description. I love the idea of having cute printable, I can have like a Christmas border, like cute printable instructions to go with this. I'm not sure that I'm gonna have time to figure that out before this video goes up. I'm gonna try. I've never done that before, and I posted in one of my groups and asked how to do it, and they gave me some instruction. I'm just gonna have to take a stab at it and see if I can figure it out. So I'll let you know in the description if I figured that out or not, if there are printable instructions for this, and if not, it just lends itself to the sweet handmade feel of this gift if you sit down and write out these instructions nicely. That's fine too, if that's what you end up having to do. But hopefully I can get you printables in time for this. If you want to give these apple butter cookie mixes as gifts, but you don't can, or you're not sure about the apple butter portion, check out your local farmer's market, or if you have a whole food store, a natural food store, or if your grocery store, your local grocery store has like a little local section of goods, go check it out, because you may be able to find some home canned local fruit butters available for purchase. Definitely, I'm assuming at the farmer's market. I know mine has tons. Or go to your grocery store and see if they have small quantities of properly sealed, shelf-stable fruit butter that you could include in these gifts. Otherwise, you don't have to include it, but how cute was that, having the dry mix along with the fruit butter to go with it? So, so cute. The next recipe that we're going to work on are Snickerdoodles. Snickerdoodles are Tom's favorite cookie, and so I definitely would like to keep some Snickerdoodle mix on my shelf so that I can whip a batch up whenever I'm feeling like I want to spoil him. And so this is the jar that I'm going to use to keep it in. So I want to do however much this jar can hold. I'm going to start with a double batch, 2 batches worth, and then if I feel like I have room for a third, I'll just add a third. But again, we're going to mix it in the bowl first. When I'm giving you the ingredients, I'm going to tell you the single batch ingredients, and all of this will be in the description, and you can increase it or decrease it yourself. So I'm not going to give you the double batch measurements. I'm just going to give you the single batch, and you can do with that what you will. So we're going to add 3/4 a cup of white sugar. We're going to add 1/2 cup of lightly packed brown sugar. And then we've got 2 3/4 a cup of all-purpose flour. That's the thing about doing these recipes. You go through an awful lot of flour. You're going to do 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. All right, let's try and get this nice and combined. All right, that looks pretty good and combined to me. So I've got my container and my funnel. Let's see if we can fit all of this in the jar that I chose. Oh yeah, that all fit in there nicely. Look at how beautiful. All right, now again, when you're trying to figure out how much dry mix you need per batch, you just add together all of the dry ingredient measurements to get the cup amount. 4 cups plus the few teaspoons. So when you're fishing out your dry mix, you need roughly 4 cups. 4 cups plus a little tiny bit extra. Okay, so for the Snickerdoodles, we've got 4 cups of dry mix, 1 cup of butter softened, 1 egg plus 1 egg yolk, and 1 tablespoon of vanilla. You're going to want to combine your butter, egg, and vanilla, so your wet ingredients. And then you're going to want to gradually add your dry mix until combined. When you're making cookie dough, you don't ever want to overmix. So add it gradually and just mix until it's combined. Just like with the apple butter cookies, refrigerating the dough makes it easier to work with because, again, you're going to roll these out and roll them in the cinnamon sugar. And when the dough is stiff from being in the refrigerator, it just makes it easier to do that. So I'll write that instruction on here, refrigerate for roughly an hour, but really however much time you have. I mean, I've stuck dough in the fridge for 10 minutes before and then just went with it. So however long you can have it in there. You want your dough balls to be about 1.5 to 2 inches. That's what I have found. That's the size that I really like anyway. And roll those in the cinnamon sugar. Bake at 325 degrees for 12 to 15 minutes. Now, the cinnamon sugar. Here's what I think I'm gonna do. And this is new for me, so I'm just gonna try it and see how I like it. I'm gonna do some baggies. I'm doing baggies because they can be reused. I have 2 batches in here, so I've got 2 baggies. And I'm gonna do 1/2 cup of white sugar and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. Super easy to combine when it's in the baggie. I've got my instructions, and I wanna go ahead and tape those on here. And then on the other side of the instructions, I will tape the cinnamon sugar to the jar. And there we go. We've got Snickerdoodles, easy. And all I'll have to do is add the wet ingredients. Awesome. Very exciting. Next up, we're going to do banana bread or zucchini bread. Now, I'm running out of those big containers, so I'm just going to do 1 serving in one of these quart jars. And to start with, we need 1/2 cup of white sugar, 1/2 cup of lightly packed brown sugar, 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And banana bread or zucchini bread are so much fun to mess around with when it comes to the spices. Just classic cinnamon is totally fine and delicious. I love adding a little bit of ground clove. I think cloves smell and taste fantastic. And they're so interesting and so spicy. Like they add a little bit of spice. Not like pepper spice, but like a different kind of spice. And so I'm just going to put like a dash in here, but that's just for fun. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I love cloves. We're going to go ahead and get this all mixed together. And then lastly, I debated whether or not I was going to include it. I'm going to try it and just see how it goes. I'm going to add in the chocolate chips. I always add chocolate chips to my banana bread or zucchini bread. And I do not see why I wouldn't be able to add them to this dry mix. They're going to be on the shelf stable anyway. This is just storing them in a different capacity. So I'm going to go for it. I often add walnuts to my banana bread and zucchini bread as well, but that is not something that I would store in this dry mix because nuts naturally have oil in them, and I do think that that would cause this to go rancid, whereas I don't think the chocolate chips are going to react or have any kind of negative consequence. I would not store it with the nuts. I would add those right before I bake it. Let's get this into its container. I probably could have fit this in a pint-sized jar, but it's already in this jar, so we're going with it. So I only made 1 serving of this, but if I had made numerous servings, you would need 2.5 cups of your dry mix. So I'm still going to go ahead and write that. You want 1/2 cup of butter softened. You want 3 to 4 mashed bananas, or I think I usually do 2 cups of shredded zucchini, 1/2 cup of yogurt or sour cream. Something like that is going to give you such a delicious moist bread. 2 eggs. So for this one, I would actually start by combining the butter and the mashed banana and get that all nice and combined. And then I would add in your eggs, your yogurt or sour cream, and your vanilla. And then you will want to gradually add your dry mix just until combined. And for this one, your oven is going to be preheated to 350 and you're baking it for roughly an hour. I'd like to address something else I'm just thinking of. A lot of people in the comments were like, of my original video, were like, what size pans did you use for everything? I'm very rarely ever going to give you a pan size. So just accept it and move on. I'm probably not going to give you one because I don't know. Hardly any of the pans that I have are properly labeled. I never know how to tell. I'm not getting a measuring tape out and measuring them. Here's what you need to know. If you use a bigger pan, your product is going to be thinner and will need to be baked for less time. If you use a smaller pan, it'll be thicker and you'll need to bake it longer to get through to the middle. Also, for something like a banana bread, if it's thicker because it's in a smaller container, you will likely need to tent it with some foil to keep the top from burning in the amount of time it takes to cook through to the middle. So I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what size bread pan you should use. You could make this thin like a cake. You could make this thick like a loaf of bread. It's really up to you and your preference and what you're looking for. Heck, you could make a banana bread cake and put a cream cheese frosting on it and eat it, serve it like it's a cake. And that would be delicious, and it would be thinner than if you were to make this a loaf of bread. Do you understand what I'm saying? So these are the kind of things, I know a lot of you are new here and I'm so happy you're here, but these are the kinds of things that I want you to think critically about. I say these kinds of things all the time because I want you to grow in the kitchen. I want your skills to grow, and I don't want you to be so incredibly dependent on a recipe that you aren't getting the concept. Does that make sense? And that's what I'm here for. Any one of you could go to Pinterest and look up a banana bread recipe. What YouTube channels like this exist for is to help you think outside the box and to help you think, how can I change this to suit me? How can I change this to maybe be more enjoyable for me and the people that are going to be consuming it? Things like that. So I'm not going to give you a pan size. I want you to think about it and figure it out. If this is a banana bread loaf and it's baking for 1 hour, so if you're putting it in a loaf pan, you're probably safe with that. If you want to make it like a cake, I would maybe check it at like 30, 35 minutes, something like that. Okay, this is the last one, and this one is really going to challenge you. I had to put it last because if I put it first, I would have already lost you. This one is not convenient the way the rest of them are convenient because it would be a million times easier to buy this one from the grocery store. I'm talking about cinnamon rolls, homemade cinnamon rolls. Have you ever made homemade cinnamon rolls before? They're not, I don't want to say they're hard. They're not hard. They're just time consuming. You have to be very intentional when it comes to making homemade cinnamon rolls. But you guys, the ones from the grocery store are full of junk. They're full of junk. And if you make them homemade, just think about how you would be blessing your family. What a blessing that would be. What an act of love to the people around you if you were to make them homemade cinnamon rolls. And so what I'm doing today, I'm making a convenient baking mix for them to make it a little bit easier for you on the morning that you decide you want to do this. And I kind of had Thanksgiving morning, Christmas morning in mind when I came up with this mix. Because it would save you a little bit of time to have it made, the mix made ahead of time, and then you just put everything together. But even then, I mean, these cinnamon rolls take a couple of hours to put together. So it's not as easy as going to the store and buying the Pillsbury cinnamon rolls in the little tubes, but those are so bad, and this is just so good for you in more ways than one. So let's get started putting this mix together. We've got 4 cups of all-purpose flour, half a cup of white sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 ounce packet of instant yeast. Now, if we were not making this as a make-ahead convenience baking mix, it would be active dry yeast. But because everything is going to be already mixed together, we're going to use instant in this case. I had a lot of people ask me in the previous video about how long these can last on your shelf. I don't have an answer for you because it depends on your individual ingredients. If you are using flour that you've already had for months and months and months, that flour is not any fresher when you use it in your baking mix. So it's very individual how long these last on your shelves. The longer that you let this cinnamon roll mix sit on your shelf, the less effective your yeast is going to be. That's true anyway, all the time. Your ingredients are becoming less and less effective the longer you let them sit on your shelf. Not that I'm saying you should use this in a week. You probably have months, but I'm just saying be cognizant of the fact that you want to actually, you're making these mixes to make your life more convenient. Don't make them and then just forget about them. Make them and then actually have a plan to use them. Okay, that's all we need for the dry mix. We are not done yet, but we're gonna go ahead and get this dry mix in our container here. Next, I'm going to use another baggie, and instead of a cinnamon sugar that we're gonna roll cookies in like we did for the others, this time we're going to do the dry mix for the cinnamon roll filling. That requires 1 cup of packed brown sugar and 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. Beautiful. If you have little ones, take your baggie and make sure that it is very securely closed. And say, okay, can you please help mommy mix up the brown sugar and the cinnamon? How fun, very sensory. They will enjoy helping you with that. Excellent. Now, we're gonna write out the instructions for this recipe. And I actually think, if you ask me, this is another part of it being a convenience item, because isn't it the worst when you are trying to go through your Pinterest board to find a recipe that you know you saw 3 months ago that you really wanted to make? Did you see it on Facebook? Was it on Pinterest? You're trying to go through your Safari tabs. Where is that recipe? Taking the time to make the convenience mix and write the recipe down means that you have an actual written version of it right in front of you when you go to make it. So let's go ahead and write these. It's going to be more involved than the other recipes, like I've warned you, but let's do it. So if you're making more than 1 batch of this at a time, you're going to want roughly 4.5 cups of the dry mix, 1 cup of milk. I always encourage whole milk. 1/3 a cup of melted butter and 2 eggs. That is for the actual rolls themselves, and then skip a line. And for the filling, it's roughly 1 1/4 cups if you're doing more than 1 batch. Although I would just recommend if you're gonna have more than 1 batch, I would just recommend putting them in separate baggies. But it's roughly 1 1/4 cup of the dry mix. And then again, you've got 1/3 cup melted butter and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So to make the cinnamon rolls, you're going to start by mixing your wet ingredients. So your milk, your melted butter, and your eggs. Just like the other recipes, you're going to gradually add your dry ingredients and mix them until they're combined. At this point, you've got your dough. You're going to want to place that in a lightly oiled bowl. You oil the bowl to keep it from sticking. I usually just do this with some olive oil. And you want to let it rise for 1 hour. I always cover mine with something like a dish towel or some plastic wrap. From there, once you've let it rise, you want to turn it out onto a lightly floured surface, very lightly floured. And you want to roll it out into a rectangle. Do not ask me what the measurement for that rectangle is, because I do not know. Just into a rectangle. Next, you want to make your filling, which is really easy. It's just the melted butter, the vanilla, and then your dry mix. You can melt the butter and add the vanilla and spread that on and then sprinkle the cinnamon and brown sugar, or you can mix it all together in the bowl. I usually like to mix it all together in the bowl and then use like a spoon, like the back of a spoon, to like push it around. It really, whatever is easiest for you. At this point, you want to either the same dish towel that you had covered your dough with initially, or I like to sometimes use paper towels. Either way, you want it to be damp. Either paper towel or dish towel, get them damp and lay it very gently on top of what you've just done. And you want to let that sit and rest on the counter for another 30 to 45 minutes and let it do a second rise. Now, from there, you've got your rectangle right in front of you. On the long side, you want to roll it into a log away from you. You're rolling away from you. And you want to keep rolling until the seam side is down. From there, you can use a very sharp knife to cut them into rolls. I have found in doing that it drags and you don't end up with the very pretty swirl in the middle. So I always use dental floss. You could also use string, like sewing string, and I kind of scooch it underneath, bring it up, and then cross it very quickly. And the floss or string, whatever you use, is actually very sharp when moved quickly like that. And it cuts perfect rolls without ruining or dragging the swirl that's on the inside. So take those, put them into whatever dish you can fit them in. I almost always make mine in my round cast iron skillet. So just arrange them in whatever dish you have. I would grease whatever it is you're going to bake them in. I have really well seasoned cast iron, so I even then I'll put a little bacon grease, a little butter, maybe a little lard, something, and maybe coconut oil to try and get it a little nonstick. So whatever you choose to use, I would definitely grease it with something. And then your oven is preheated to 350 degrees, and you're baking these babies for 20 minutes, approximately, based on your oven. My oven runs hot, so I would definitely check these at 15 minutes, but roughly 20 minutes. Now here's the thing. I thought a lot about frosting and what I wanted to do for that, because I was thinking you could get a rough frosting bag put together, but it's only going to have like 2 things in it, and I don't think it's really worth it. Plus, the frosting, when I make cinnamon rolls, the frosting is usually where I have my fun, and I have come up with different frosting combinations. There's the classic, you could do a chocolate, you could do a cream cheese. There's a really good orange extract one out there that is just absolutely delicious. You could do a lemon one, you could do an almond one. There are so many different frosting, icing options out there that I don't want to pigeonhole you into just one. I will include in the description of this video just a standard icing recipe. If you need one and don't have one, I'll include one for you. But please, and again, like I was talking about earlier, I am always encouraging you guys to think outside the box and do something different. Be adventurous, try something new. Being in the kitchen is so much fun, and so I love those opportunities to be creative. Now, when you're making cinnamon rolls, you kind of have to follow the recipe or else the rolls may not turn out. But there are places where you can have fun with it. The filling, for example, is one of those. You could do a chocolate filling. You could sprinkle some chocolate chips in there. Oh my gosh, you could do some peppermint, crushed peppermint in there. So many different options. That's an opportunity to get creative. And then the icing is another, oh man, peppermint mocha. Oh my gosh. If you did like, when you're mixing together the filling with the butter, add in a little bit of, what is it called? Like that instant espresso powder. I've got some in my cabinet. Add in a little bit of that, and then when you're making the frosting, add like sprinkled peppermint bits on top, peppermint mocha. That might have to happen. But do you see what I mean? Like, all it takes is a little bit of thought and a little bit of imagination, and you can come up with something really fun. And you've got a pretty basic cinnamon roll recipe. Anybody could do it. You absolutely can make this. And then when you serve them, if you've been creative and you've come up with a fun filling or a fun icing, instead of presenting cinnamon rolls, which is impressive on its own, if you were to have somebody over for brunch and you made peppermint mocha cinnamon rolls, you're going to tell me that whoever you have won't be just utterly impressed with you. It's fun. It's really fun to expand your skills and whatnot. This is a little bigger than my container. You know what? Nobody's going to see it except me and all of you. So I'm just gonna go for it. This second round of easy baking mixes was a lot of fun for me to brainstorm, and I want to thank you all for that, because as I was coming up with these recipes and trying to decide what I wanted to do for this, I was thinking about all of you. All of you who found me through the first Easy Baking Mixes video and all of the comments that were left, I really truly took those to heart and read them and pondered them and thought about how I wanted to implement them in my own kitchen. So hopefully I remembered everything. I really tried to implement your tips and stuff, because how cool that you guys took time out of your day to leave me feedback and tips or whatever. And I want you to know that I hear you and I see you, and I so appreciate you taking the time to offer me your feedback. So I tried to implement that in today's video. But even beyond that, just coming up with the recipes, like I was really thinking about you all and thinking, what can I give them that would be helpful, delicious, challenge them, help them grow. I was really envisioning you all, even some of your faces from your profile pictures on your YouTube, and like, how can I help them? What can I give them? So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I'm just absolutely tickled to death that you all are here. It has been so much fun for me, and it has been so motivating. I love this YouTube channel, and I've loved all the content that I've created for it. But now that there are so many of you here, I feel this like fire inside of me to really get after it and put out some really good, helpful content for you guys. So I thank you for inspiring me in that way, and for hanging out with me, for listening, commenting, watching, liking, sharing, everything that you're doing. It's helping my channel immensely. Wow, the growth that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, incredible. So thank you guys so much for being here, and truly, I can't wait to see you in my next video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments and I will try to get back to you. I really tried to think all of these through and cover my bases. So let me know if I missed anything, but can't wait to see you in my next one. Have faith, my friends, and keep moving forward. Bye.